Also, you can see how for a lot of children that go through, a difficult childhood, how in many ways it creates a heart wall, as being described as a heart wall, right? Because this is how you defend yourself. You don't
Right.
allow people in because all of a sudden that's part of then I know, trying to get these things released.
That's it.
It's
That's it.
another part of the healing.
It's a part of the healing. And the children, I I have different. My name when growing up was Kathy, and I there's a inner image I have, which is a pool of water in Hawaii filled with these dolphins.
Mm,
And whenever I do a piece of healing with another child part, I always end up bringing them to this pool. So I've got all these little kids playing with these dolphins. And it
mm.
even feels like because dolphin energy, I mean, I've got the dolphin there,
Right.
is playful.
Yes.
And you know, growing up in an alcoholic family as the oldest kid, I had to learn to be responsible pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so it's been a journey to learn how to be just playful and silly.
Mm.
And so, in fact, sometimes the kids jump in the water and they turn into baby dolphins. It's like it's like it's so healing,
Yes.
and we need more of that energy. And again, the I think that that innocent child can then more easily access that divine child that has this extraordinary wisdom, because that's the one that even speaks through little kids sometimes that says the emperor has no clothes, for
Mm.
example.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
can see it's not like just the naive child of, oh, everything is cool and wonderful and great and new. But again, at the end of the Tarot journey, this child has gone through a lot of experiences and integrated a lot of experiences, and out of that has returned to wonder. Uh,
Mm.
some mystics call this the second naivete, you
Right.
know, that comes out of healing.
Yeah.
It's really, and when you meet, you look at the Dalai Lama, you know, you
Mm.
look at Nelson Mandela. You know, there's that book of
Mm.
the two of them, these two old men, and you see them like holding hands. You know how you see like little boys
Yeah,
holding
yeah.
hands? Which, in I don't know about you, but in our culture, little boys are not supposed to hold their hands to each other very long. Whereas you go to Italy and they're like kissing each other on the mouth, and it's like, wow, this is a whole different culture here in the United States. But So you see these two old men holding hands, and you listen to them talk, and they're giggling half the time.
Yeah.
It's like these old men they've both been through a lot. The Dalai Lama has been through hell.
Mm.
Nelson Mandela went through hell. And
Mm.
yet, what has been restored is this delight,
Yeah.
this child, and that's the wise child and the
Yeah.
integrated, innocent child. I
And I
hope I'm
think
not making the map too complicated, but
no,
I want
no,
to
not
do
at
it
all. I think about my ex-father-in-law who passed on in 2016, and he was, the most wonderful man. And one of the things that you would always say about him is that he always had that childlike sense of wonder with the world. When you went places, he would be, "Oh, John, look at that," and he would just be, and I think to an extent, looking back on it, you just think he had the advantage. He was able to live in the now moment, right? He wasn't stuck in the past. He wasn't thinking about what was going to go wrong in the future. He was there. He was present. And he was, and he wasn't a spiritual man at all. He did go to church and he, occasionally, and it wasn't that he didn't believe or anything, but it wasn't his world. But he
Yeah,
just being who he was, that inner child was absolutely
there.
and in fact, it was interesting actually because I occasionally draw like the oracle cards, very occasionally,
Hmm.
and I always draw one at the end, which is like from my mom, message from my mom, and then a message from John, my ex father-in-law. And in fact, I've still got it attached to his picture over there now by the altar.
Mm.
And the last one that came up was playfulness, right? So. Yeah, that's his message to
All the synchronicities. Here we are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, because and that's the what I always said about him. He was, and in fact, I have the poster over there, which is the thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of that candle will not be shortened. And again, coming back to the Buddha, in the same way, happiness does not decrease through being shared. And that was kind of who he was. He was the person who lit everybody's inner happiness candle in life, right?
Wonderful. That's
And
wonderful.
yeah. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of who he was. And it was great actually because like he was around for 30 years that I was around in it, which was great because in many ways he was very humble. He was, but he was funny. He was very witty. He was like but he had that sense of childlike wonder. So he was a kind of a role model for me as well. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He's so like because he could get on with anybody. And it was like if you'd never met him before and spoke to him for 2 minutes, you'd go away with a big smile on your face and probably a little bit of a chuckle.
That's, I would say he was a medicine man.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
because I like to, I mean, it sounds like he brought in the medicine, the healing energy of joy, of wonder. It's so much of ordinary consciousness and the forces that hold it in place are about distractions that get us focused not on the now, but if it is in the now, it's about stuff that isn't helpful. I mean, I
right.
live with, like I'm hungry and I'm eating junk. It's
Mm,
like, or I'm doing something that's even it's in the now, it's not really fulfilling. Or focus on the past and the future. And so to be somebody who just goes through life interacting with people, and people can in his presence have that momentary connection with humor and playfulness and the present moment. That's medicine. It's
yeah.
like, people might 10 years later not all of a sudden start integrating, experiencing the seed that he planted in the
Mm,
interaction with him all those years ago. That's wonderful.
yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And in fact, he was kind of in a way, he was almost responsible for me doing what I'm doing now because after he'd passed on and my daughter was, and I've mentioned this before, but she went and had the reading because she was so desperate to get in touch with her grandfather again. A mediumistic, and he was there front and center. And when I started going for my first ever one, he was there. He was the first person who turned up.
So he's really connected to you.
He's super connected. And, like my mom as well. There's my mom and John, who, to me, they're front and center. I talk to them every day, a number of
That's
times,
wonderful.
every single
That's
day.
wonderful. That's wonderful. That's wonderful, John.
Mm.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, but again, it's coming back to that playfulness, that inner child, but again, what has amazed me in recent times, actually, I've heard so many stories about, abuse, childhood abuse, and things I mean, that, as you say, you start off with that innocence, and to have that innocence taken away from you in the worst kind of way, and imprinting, because that's often how things do go from generation to generation,
That's
isn't
it.
it?
That's
People
it. That's
carry
it.
that wound forward. The wound doesn't get
That's it.
released, therefore you're then bringing that into your
That's
next
right.
family scene, and
That's
it
right. That's right.
perpetuates generation on generation.
That's right.
And it's interesting actually because I remember Dr. Bradley Nelson. He's the one who does like the muscle testing kind of
Mm-hmm.
kinesiology
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And I've seen him like when he does his, he'll demonstrate it in front of a few hundred people and he gets somebody up out of the audience. And he will sort of like work out through this matrix of potential answers. If it's on the left hand side of this grid, if it's on the right hand side, if it's left hand
Right.
side, then it's weak. If it's on the right hand side, it's strong. And then
Mm-hmm.
they work all the way down. And then finally, they'll find some wound that needs to be released. And he'll go through the releasing mechanism. And what was interesting, there was one lady in particular who'd gone through, and it was a lot of physical pain that she had
Mm-hmm.
which was released. And it was like she'd lived with this for so many years, but it was ancestral.
Yes.
And what
Yes.
was interesting is that somebody came back to him after the show was finished and said to him, "Do you know what?" He said, "I can see spirits." He
Mm-hmm.
said, "When you released that." lady from her physical
Mhm.
trauma, ancestral trauma, I could see 200 people behind her, which was for them because it was a release for the ancestral kind of thing as well. Because he used to take it back. How many generations has it been? Has it been this? Has it been this? Has it been it? And it was like a long dated kind of thing. So it just shows how that wound can carry on. So the importance of releasing the wound is absolutely vital, correct? I mean, that's the way I
Yes.
look at it.
And I feel like part of the human condition, because we're born into duality, includes a kind of woundedness in that we are born into the illusion of separateness.
Mm,
And Thomas Keating, one of my favorite spiritual teachers, I mentioned him before. He said, "The great illusion is that we are separate." He used the God word. I will use Holy Mystery, the divine source. So he said, "So the great human illusion is that we're separate from that, and the spiritual journey is designed to help us remember the truth of who we really are." So we come into this woundedness, this duality realm. And you're right. In fact, when I work with my female ancestors on the Irish side, that's that circle of grandmothers that I'm
mm,
in. And I have watched when I do different pieces of healing work, I've watched the wound be healed, or sometimes it'll go a certain generation back and it'll get stuck and there's another piece to do.
mm,
And something I wanted to say that was really interesting about healing work. Um, when I was a therapist back in the 80s, the primary modality, and when I was a client in the 70s, was talk therapy, which was oftentimes fairly long term. I sat with this woman for 4 years, and that was important because the injury was in relationship. And so what I had was a reparative relationship. And when I was a therapist, that was oftentimes people have been deeply injured in relationship. And so our work had content, but a lot of what was happening was in the relationship field between us. But now I have a lot of colleagues and friends who are healers. And what's extraordinary, John, is that sometimes long term or longish term work is helpful because, some people will sort of do a little bit of a spiritual bypass. But somatic experiencing, there's a whole EMDR, eye movement thing now that's specifically for trauma. Ketamine. I mean, people have been using ketamine and uh, microdosing mushrooms with Vietnam vets who've had PTSD, and they've done everything from psychotherapy, electroconvulsive shock therapy, energy healing. They've done the whole gamut.
mm,
They do 2 or 3 sessions of this, and it's gone.
mm.
So I want to hold it that there are many healing modalities, and there are some wounds that can be quickly released. There are others that actually need time and different kinds of approaches. But I watched a Native American medicine woman remove a tumor from a woman's breast,
Mm.
and it never returned.
It's remarkable, isn't it? It is remarkable. And you know what? This, I've said this before. I think that what we ultimately go back to after this change is we go back to the wisdom. We go back to understanding metaphysics. We go back to understanding how powerful that is.
Mhm,
And the fact is that you don't need medication a lot of the time.
mhm, mhm.
Pharmaceuticals can be, they're not always your friend. Okay. And
Right, right,
right.
right,
If
right.
there's a natural remedy and a way of doing this and a natural form of therapy, which I know there are so many, then this is where we need to get back to. And
That's right.
it's interesting you say that about the cancer growth because again, Greg Braden has demonstrated this on a few occasions, but there's the video and it's less than 3 minutes long, but it's in China. with the lady who's got a tumor, and it's a bad one. But she's got, and they actually show it on an ultrasound. So basically, half of the screen shows the ultrasound of the actual cancer itself, and then there are about, I think, three or four physicians around her. I say physicians, but they were kind of like, more of the esoteric, not esoteric, but more of the mystic side of things. She'd been there for a while because they had to make sure that her mindset was right because it's kind of a
Mhm,
faith healing.
mhm,
And
mhm.
basically, they stood around and they were talking in Chinese. They were chanting the same thing over and over. It took 2 minutes, 45 seconds to completely shrink the cancer to zero. And what they were saying was, it has already happened. It has already gone. It has already happened. And she at the same time is adding to that process by that positive kind of thing. Again, it goes back to that, I forget the name, Emil, whatever his name was, that he said, every day and every way I get better and better, which was an early way
Right, right.
of
An early
actually
affirmation of,
using
yeah,
affirmations, and
yeah,
actually
yeah,
they'd proven
yeah,
scientifically that actually does work. And so it kind of just shows how much power we have and
yeah.
how much we've been convinced that we don't have. And it was something, actually, I think I mentioned it on the last weekly that we did, about the Rife machine that came in. It was like 1922, this thing was out there, which was Royal Rife, who'd created this machine that used vibrational frequencies that offset the vibrational frequencies of cancer. So when the wave, everything is frequency. So the cancer's like this, right? And then he would use the equal and opposite wave against the cancer, so it kind of creates a flat
Oh,
line, right? So that's the principle of it. And that was back in 1922. The whole thing got squashed and crushed
of
because,
course. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that was
like
103 years ago.
years ago. Wow.
And they know how to resolve this stuff, but at the end of the day, not meaning to be controversial, I'm just telling the truth. The fact is that there is there are bigger forces at play there who have decided what is good for the, not so much what is good for the individual. It's not been about, it's the amount of suppression that there has been,
Yeah,
whether it's medical remedies,
yeah.
whether it's free energy and stuff like that, which again,
Right,
Tesla
right.
Tesla created, was again 100 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And is coming round now. This is the era when I believe it all comes back in. Now, part of that, I believe, will actually be the fact that, and we see it certainly in the UK at the moment, the National Health Service is going through, to call it a crisis is a bit of an understatement. The whole thing is falling apart, and those who are working in it are the first to put their hands up and say, this is just not working anymore.
And by the way, that's happening here. I have a lot of clients who are physicians and nurses, and they are heartsick because of how here, I mean, I have to say it's hard to hear that National Health Service, because I think a lot of people here in the States think if we didn't have medicine for profit, that it would be better because basically the corporations run it. And again, like I said, my clients are just, they're heartsick. They can
Mm.
spend 7 minutes with a patient. But now you're saying even national health. So that means the whole Western system, not just the for profit, but all of it is in the process of collapsing.
I think it is. I think it is.
Wow.
And, I think in the long term, there will be a rebalance. Okay.
Mm,
I do
mm,
think that where this will take us to, once we get through this time of absolute disclosure, which is the years ahead, we'll realize that we have an awful lot more personal power to heal ourselves and to actually prevent the imbalances from happening that
right,
create disease in the first place.
right,
Because,
right, right.
because modern pharmaceuticals are kind of attacking the symptoms, but they're not actually creating, attacking the source of the problem in the first place.
That's right. That's
Just
right.
keeps on going round and round.
It's and well, and I mean, my father-in-law had an experience where he got quite ill and was hospitalized. And one of the things they started doing was taking out the meds he was on. He was like on 11 different medications. And he started recovering when they took out a bunch. It's like, because he'd take one medication, it would give him indigestion, and then they'd give him something for the indigestion, and then that like caused something else, and it was like this Rube Goldberg crazy thing that almost killed him. I mean, here in the
Mm.
States, and I haven't seen this statistic for a couple of years, so if this is no longer true, please people let us know. But I think it's called iatrogenic, doctor caused. uh, so iatrogenic death, it was like number 3 in the nation. So deaths actually created by medical treatment was right up there in the top 5. So it's, John, something I want to, because that's where I think we're going. I mean, I think we're going towards Star Trek. I think we're going to that future life that you and I talked about, where I'm sitting doing some emotional healing, and the people gathered around and sent light to us, which I know was helping the healing that was occurring between me and my future life. Um, I do want to say that the woman who was the head of IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, died of a brain tumor.
Mm.
And people around her were devastated because she was totally into spirituality, meditation. It's like she got it, and yet she still died from that tumor. And one of my main teachers, Lynn Breedlove, credible, intuitive, that was like foundational for me, she died of melanoma. And what I want to just put out is, and this is never anything I've gotten from you and Jolie, thankfully, which I would have expected to not get because of who you guys are. Um, there can sometimes be inadvertently, first of all, an expectation that this could happen for everybody, that everybody can be healed in that way. For all I know, it was Lynn's karma to die of melanoma. It's like that. I don't know what that was about for
Mm.
her. And because we're learning all these things, and then people who don't get helped by it can end up feeling ashamed, like I'm doing it wrong. And I'll see that, when I was in Santa Cruz, I'd see new agey people at a lower vibrational consciousness than we're talking about. Well, if you're sick, it's because you're not thinking the right thoughts, and it's your fault. And then I'm kind of get back into Christianity, and I'm exploring these waters, and then here are these sort of evangelical types. Well, you're sick because you're not praying the right way. And it's like,
Yeah.
stop it. It's it's some people really recover. I believe we're evolving to the place where more and more, maybe all of us, will be able to. But I also want to hold a space for the folks who have a different journey to make.